and he said, my son is, not doing well, but today I have hope. And that meant everything to me as a mother, bringing people to Baltimore to experience these gigantic, dedicated brains, and it's all for you. This is a research symposium that families are more than welcome to.
And the other thing we didn't get into at all was all this precision medicine. That and just the whole component of innovation, that there, again, back to the thing that there are people working on this.
That was our guest third mom, Laura Pogliano, and Mimi Feldman, who you know very well, and I'm Randy Kay. And we just returned from the Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Symposium, where families were invited, along with practitioners in the mental health field, to learn about new research and the value of partnership in the treatment of schizophrenia. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randy Kay. Finally, a place to talk about the truth. Hi, this is episode 96, we think. And if you notice, things look a little bit different. We are doing this together.
In the same place.
In the same place. And actually, we have a different third mom today. We have our friend of the podcast who's been on before, Laura Pogliano, to be third mom tonight because we are all in Baltimore for the Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Center 6th Annual Symposium. And what we want to do today is talk a bit about the Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Center that has a partnership program, a template of partnership that we want to talk about and talk about what happened at the symposium and what we learned and how much fun it was to be together. And Laura is the perfect guest because it's because of Laura that we're here. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys. Thanks for coming to Baltimore for the symposium and bookending the symposium with this nice podcast where we'll tell all your listeners about what happened the last 2 days.
Yeah, absolutely. So you may have heard us talking about that. And we are actually in Laura's apartment. We're not going to tell you where it is, but you can see beautiful. There's a rainbow behind us, which I love. And so let's begin. Laura, if the listeners may or may not be familiar with you, you can check out, Laura's been on a couple of our episodes in the past, particularly the one where Mimi and I first met when we interviewed Bob Kolker, the author of Hidden Valley Road, which is now a documentary on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
And so, but Laura, you were somehow in there and the three of us had a conversation with Bob Kolker. So that's the last time that you were the third mom on the podcast. So that's one of our older episodes. We'll put that in the show notes. Tell us about, I know we could talk about your son, Zachariah, for a long time, but tell us briefly your story and what Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Center meant for you guys.
Well, like most families, we were blindsided by schizophrenia, right? In a weekend, his behavior just seemed to flip. And then it went from bad to worse. And I, got a lot of bad advice at first and didn't know what I was doing. And when about 6 months in, when he started to really have extreme body complications, like Franken-walking, I said, okay, enough is enough. This child needs a hospital. Whatever's happening, he needs a hospital. So luckily, and we know this is a hot commodity, Hopkins had a bed open and we were streamlined into their hospital system. Of course, I'm brand new to all of this. I knew generally that we didn't have institutions anymore. I didn't know who really helped. I knew there was a large homeless population that was driven by emptying the hospitals, but I didn't know what to do with my own child, and I didn't know what was wrong. It was obvious that it was neurological, but I didn't know. So the first thing they did was take away any medications he was on, which turned out to be Prozac. which is pointless. And
Well, not
and
for some
watched,
people, but for Zach it
yes,
was.
yeah. But I mean, for schizophrenia, no. And watched his illness, right? And then they ran copious amount of diagnostic tests. And within a week or 10 days of that, they said that he had bipolar disorder with psychotic and catatonic features because of his body stiffness and some posturing, etc. So that started us on a treatment program. I will say in hindsight, I didn't realize how much that hospital system did for me in educating me on a serious brain disorder. Because as a parent, you're dealing with a child, and the things that are happening are behavioral, and it's very hard for you to determine, is this a medical issue? Is this a behavioral issue? Do I need to be tougher on him? This perfectly well-behaved boy all the time. And
I'm going to
so,
stop you for a second
mhm,
because I'm already hearing two things that are rare. One, a battery of tests.
Yeah.
Two, educating you. You
they
making
educate, yes.
Can I
They,
ask you what is a battery of tests? We haven't run
oh,
across
they
that in our
ran every kind
experience.
of test known to man to rule out everything else, including pandas, including Lyme disease, including like I think they tapped his spinal fluid. They did their due diligence, head to toe body, to say, why is the
Amazing. Yeah.
17-year-old athletic pianist walking like Frankenstein? We were admitted to a psychiatric floor, but they kind of told me we have to find out what's really wrong, right? Um, and then unfortunately, it turned out to be a serious mental illness. Here's how they educated me. I would be in their office crying. I went every single day. I never missed a day of a hospitalization for Zachariah in almost 7 years. But I would be in their office and I would say, now such and such happened. Or then he said this. And I'd be upset about symptoms and hallucinations. And they would look me in the eye and say, he's very sick. That's illness. They never spoke to me in terms that weren't couched in illness. He's not doing this on purpose. He cannot help, what's happening. But, and, and again, parental points of view are like, why is my child acting like this? And you're immediately thinking behavior, but they just gently, literally every meeting, he's still very sick, Laura. And I would bring something up and they would say, that's part of the illness, right?
And
So
that's I'm hearing also they listen. First of all, he was 17 at this time, so
yes,
didn't have conservatorship issues, but they listened. And then so I'm hearing so much already about the partnership, and so many of our listeners are like, we do spend a lot of time saying there are things wrong. So what we're talking about tonight is when something is done right,
yes,
what it can be done, and everything that you're saying is reflected in the symposium that we attended today.
yes.
So we already heard battery of tests, listen to the family, and educate the family. Anything else they did right in terms of partnership?
I mean, I suppose they knew they were going to turn him back over to me and I needed to be equipped, right? He can't live in a hospital. But I was basically falling apart in front of their eyes. And at no point did they ever say, tell me I was wrong. Tell me I was acting terrible. And I was wrong and I acted terrible. At no point were they ever judgmental about everything. I was just like, help me. And they did. They have a family meeting every single Friday. Mine was on Friday, other people's could be other days. But the family meeting was the whole care team, me, and if I had had a husband or siblings, whatever. My sisters visited Baltimore. They went to the family meeting, right? And to talk about with Zachariah and to talk about everything that was going on with this treatment. Where is he at? They talk to me every single week to ask me really important questions, like who is he really as a person before this illness struck?
So I can't
What is
imagine.
Yeah.
what is
You
his
know, our
what is his
experience, and
baseline? Right?
I'm
How
sure
close
you,
is he to being the old Zack as they were medicating him? Where are we, Laura? how close is he to his old self?
Yeah, go ahead, Mimi.
Sorry.
Well, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but I mean, uh, for most of us, our experience is years and years and years of jumping up and down and screaming to just be heard, and nobody ever being interested in our perceptions or what we see or how we might be able to augment their information. I mean, this is everyone's dream come true, what you're talking about.
It's a dream come true. And I have said many, many times, my child would not have lived as long as he did with this terrible disease if I hadn't been 15 minutes outside of Johns Hopkins back door. It was just lucky. I lived here. They had a bed. They started me and him on the right path. Now, he had medication changes over the years and things like that. So nothing was like a perfect quick fix. That's not what we experienced. But they were behind me and they were behind him
You
every
know,
step of the way.
when I was thinking about this the other day, and it's so much the experience of most parents, is that we spend 75% of our time and energy navigating the system
Yes.
to get to the precipice of the place where we can help our son. Can you imagine, or our children? Can you imagine? Well, you had that experience where all that energy, all those years, instead of being spent trying to navigate the system and get to the point where you can help them, if you just walk in with your kid and they help them.
So in a way, it was, look, no one's lucky when this illness strikes their family. We know that. But
Right, right.
in our world, it is lucky to find care where they value partnership. And what I also love is some of the most powerful things I've ever heard from a practitioner are things like, what are your loved one's strengths? What are, what is the baseline? What do they love to do? I even heard that last night. So last night, today was a symposium. Last night, there was a smaller panel. The symposium was for practitioners, doctors, as well as family members who were invited to come and fed for free, I have to say. And this is, such a fantastic opportunity. But last night, for those of us that arrived yesterday, there was a panel for some family members where the doctor spoke to us. And, this came up, what do you like to do? What does normal feel like to you? So these are some of their attitudes. So I'm hearing this, and I know in NAMI, when I've taught family to family, one of the most powerful questions is, what are your loved ones' strengths, even now? Like, what are their strengths? What do they love to do? So, Laura, I know that, I first met you actually through an issue of USA Today when I opened up and saw an article that you had written about Zack when Zack was doing incredibly well. And you called it, I believe, The Fortunate Mother, right? Right. So, and I was jealous, I'm not gonna lie, because your son was doing so amazingly well. And through no fault of Hopkins, sadly, Zack has passed away. And,
Right.
But he did have a period of really like doing very well because of this partnership. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So over the years, there's ebbs and flows, and he was, I think, particularly sensitive to everything that a medication did to a person. He didn't have an easy time with any single medication. I used to say he's the Charlie Brown of schizophrenia. If there's a side effect, the poor kid got it. And some of them were just drastically humiliating for him and ruinous to your spirit and your willingness to continue, in treatment. And he didn't really complain much, which is a miracle for what he went through. But he was not, if schizophrenia is on a spectrum, he was way over here in the severe cases, right?
We know that feeling.
Yes. And so one thing I'll mention in connection with what you just said is that it's a unique kind of hell that the people who are treating your child have no knowledge of what he was like before this. It's uniquely hellish for you to say.
And no interest.
Yes. Well, a lot of places, no interest, but Hopkins wasn't like that. Literally every interview was, how close is he to his baseline? Is he getting back to normal? Because they didn't know. So they appreciated that they didn't know and they put it out there. Um, he did have periods of health, but they didn't last long. And I remember saying to Dr. Margolis, who you met last night, such a kind, just ultra competent and so kind. And I said to him one day with a relapse, just continual relapses, why does this keep happening? Why? He's medicated. He's healthy. I'm taking good care of him at home. He said stress. Sometimes just the stress of daily living causes all of this. And so Zach had periods of stability, but he never made it back to where he was.
Well, I don't know. I
And
know very few that have, and we have on the podcast have what we call superstars of recovery, and
yes,
we are going to do an episode of what we call middle of the road recovery. Like they were talking last night for some families, and this really struck me at last night's meeting, that for some families and some people, and if you're listening and you're not a superstar in recovery yet, that for some people just taking a shower is a great sign. Just going to a pottery class is a great sign. Just getting out of bed and increasing, like moving the baseline up a degree. So
yeah,
I know at the end of my book, I wrote, where I was in 2011, I wrote, my son may never work, but he's still worth loving and his life is worth living. That was sort of
that's
the
right.
conclusion. And after that book came out, and, fortunately for us, our sons are still here, so we can witness whatever ups and downs and recoveries there are. My son had 9 years of, I won't call it perfection, but he was able to work. And that was a miracle to me. So, and that was, and then there was more relapse, and listeners know the story. So with Zachary, there were some good periods, and and I will say my understanding is he passed away from heart failure. And
Yes,
so, again, so sorry for your loss, and we're doing our best to keep him alive.
yes,
And what a beautiful boy. But as far as Johns Hopkins, you have turned your grief and experience into such advocacy for Johns Hopkins. And this is the 6th annual symposium. So, tell us, we're talking about what they do right, so that
yes,
we want other places to take this example. And we know that places don't have the time and they don't have, but this is a hospital, like insurance pays for it, right? This is just a regular, this is
yeah.
not a private care, $40,000 a month place. This is
They
just a
take Medicaid and Medicare. I mean, they take,
right.
they treat indigent patients. There's, they take all kinds of insurance, but especially state, federal insurance that you have to be on when you are unable to work, and those people get treatment.
Yeah. So we're not talking a fancy schmancy. We're talking a hospital that has the model to do things right. So we're talking about some of the things they do right. They talked a lot about partnership. They asked the family members for some input, and there was a bit of complaining, but about the system in general, because everybody's like, why isn't everybody like you guys? But you
Right.
brought up something last night that sort of stopped the room and brought applause. Do you remember what you said? Hey, this is Randy. I'm going to interrupt this conversation for just a second, because there was a moment in the panel last night where, in terms of partnerships, the families were sharing how difficult it is to sometimes set boundaries with their loved ones. Do you let them smoke in the house or not? How do you stop them from smoking in the house or not? And so the discussion became one of setting boundaries, setting limits, and then Mimi spoke up. I was recording the panel and wanted to share just this bit with you.
I think that's a math that we all do. Somebody up here said something about you have to decide if you're going to take a risk that might make him better, but also might make things much worse. I think that was you. And that's our lives. I mean, especially as parents. You have to do that math all the time. But the best thing that happened to me in terms of caring for my son was a point in which somebody, a friend, not even a medical provider, anybody said to me, you know, at some point, you have to just accept that there's maybe nothing you can do, and you just have to let the universe or God or whatever it is you believe in play it out. So it's like, yeah, well, it's going to piss my son off if I say he can't make a bonfire in the middle of the living room. But if he does, he burns down the house. So that's a math I can do. If he doesn't put his trash in the trash can, you know, it's like it's picking the battles. That's what you have to do. But I think at some point you have to be willing to just lose everything. And I know that sounds terrible, but for me, that's when I became more effective. When I said, okay, he might end up dead. And there'll be nothing I can do about it, and it won't be my fault. And then I got more effective. We can say something. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was to the effect that for those of us in the audience to sit there and listen to these doctors saying, what can we do to make it better for you, was shocking.
That's what it was. Yeah. We were
And
like,
I mean,
oh,
nobody's
hello.
ever asked. I mean, again, like I said, you know, for 20 years, you feel like you're scratching on the door to just let me in. And it was such a completely different approach than anything that I've ever encountered. And also, the listening, that they wanted to listen to what we had to say, what our take on. I mean, because let's face it, we all know that we know our kids better. You know, they see a doctor generally 15 minutes in a month. You know, it sounds like, of course, this program's different, but you know, you're the one who's with them day in and day out, and the kids aren't the most forthcoming or even connected to reality in terms of what they report to the doctors. So they need the data that we can give them.
Yeah. So
They just go above and beyond. If they did half of that, it would be great care. But they do everything that they possibly can. One example is maybe year 4 or 5 of treatment, and he was really struggling. He was floundering. He was not well. He was in the hospital for a month or two, and then out for 2 months, and then back in. And one of the doctors who was on the panel last night called me at home and said, looking back over the last 5 years, when was he the healthiest? Let's go back to those. Let's try that combo of medication again. Do you remember what it was? Can you believe it? Like, he called me to say, when do you feel he was at his healthiest, and what was he taking at the time? And that's remarkable. That is not me telling the doctor, you know, I think you should do XYZ with my WebMD degree. That is the doctor saying, you know, that's not, I mean, you could see why physicians would be pushed off a little bit when, if parents are, you know, and we're just worried, we're just upset, worried parents, but they never treated me like a problem they had. And they treated me like a good mother to my son,
and a
who
member of
wanted
the
the best
team.
outcome, and they wanted the same thing.
Yeah, and a member of the team. This is bringing us back. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for that, Laura, bringing us back to this idea of partnership. It doesn't really cost anything extra, we believe, for a program to ask the family the right questions. I know there was a period where Ben was, right after my book came out, he had a huge relapse, was in the hospital, I want to say 2.5 months or something. And the doctor there happened to respect me. It didn't hurt that the book had just come out, but that wasn't the issue. It wasn't because I was an author. It was because he saw I was a mother who had done my homework. And when we had the discharge meeting, they wanted to have it without me. And he said, I'm not having any meeting without the mother there. Like, just like that. That doesn't cost any more money. Right. So let's talk about this partnership and what they brought to the table today for people who came. First of all, classical piano performances that were beautiful to give us a break. But if we can share a few of the things that I have like copious notes that I don't even read. Everything is crazy. And we're hoping to bring some of these people onto our podcast. Raquel Gurr spoke about pathways to psychosis, dissecting heterogeneity. So she spoke for a long time, and basically she said a few things that really struck me. One was, my message is you never give up,
Yes.
but the earlier you can get there, the better. And she spoke a lot about, there's not enough. I'm glad I took notes, because otherwise I wouldn't remember anything. She said there's not enough longitudinal studies.
Right.
Studies that start when someone is young and continue, because we all know you're in the hospital, you're stabilized, you're out. It's not necessarily any particular person's fault. It's the way the system works right now. But to keep following up,
Yes.
she says studying someone for 2 years from age 16 to 18 when they've just started is not enough. That you missed a little of this because you were a little bit late. But so she talked about, major groups of symptoms, and that that you can see patterns in early development before schizophrenia even is a hint. You can see patterns in early development that's similar to the ones that happen later in full psychosis. So, and then lots of evidence. And what I loved about it was that she brought home the need for multidisciplinary treatment, treating the whole person. And again, bringing back to partnership, one of the goals at Johns Hopkins.
Theme throughout all the speakers. And last night too, when we had the meeting, this idea of a more holistic approach, that the head isn't separate from the body, and that the whole system is what gets better, not just the brain.
The other important thing that she set out, I spoke to her at lunch and I said, I loved every word in your entire talk. You said so many true things that people need to hear, the whole audience benefit. She said, in fact, insults to the pregnancy. So in utero, the mother gets a virus, like something happens in the pregnancy. We don't know
make
that.
us more guilty while we're at
No,
it.
no, but I mean, we don't know that something happened in the pregnancy. Environmental factors, right? And some of those environmental factors can be violence, witnessing a death, seeing someone get shot. We kind of associate that with inner city, whatever, but it isn't exclusive to that. And just, she just went through, how did we get here from conception to them actually being in front of a doctor and getting a diagnosis. She talked about trauma, and she said, trauma is not, you didn't buy him the thing that he wanted. Trauma is, he saw someone be killed when he was 5, so she really defined trauma's relationship to the onset of an illness in a way that I think is missing in a trauma discussion.
Agreed. And yet, just to clarify, she was clear that there is a heritable quality to it as well.
Right.
So it's not that everybody, because people would say to me, oh, your son has schizophrenia. What did his father do to him? And I said, well, yeah, he had what they call in NAMI a second hit. That in family to family, they call that a second hit. If you have a tendency that you might develop schizophrenia in your DNA, then stress can actually change the DNA or can trigger but it has to be in your body as well, because we all have more than one child who had some of the same traumas. But I'm glad she addressed the trauma element of it. But just to be clear, we're not talking about, talk back to your voices and they're, and then they'll go away, because, when it's not that therapy can cure it, but it is an element of what could cause this illness to happen.
Well, the thing is too, we live in a culture right now where everybody is traumatized, everybody's has trauma, and everything that happens is called trauma. And that's what the problem is. Real trauma is in a different category.
That's right. That's in a different category. And she even said, and not every child who experiences a severe trauma will end up sick. But many years ago, a doctor said to me, you really, because this develops in utero, the stage is set in utero with the unique genetics in place to set this off later. You never really had a healthy child, but you thought you did because of the uniqueness of suddenly illness erupting. And more than one speaker spoke about the diagnosis, but then all the years leading up to it, where they were having trouble, they were in the prodromal phase, what that means, how that, and nobody notices because
Well,
people
because the
can be
prodromal
quirky.
phase looks so similar. Like I always say, you make the list of red flags for serious mental illness and you make the list of normal teenage behavior, you got the same list.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
When he got sick, I was calling it his summer of doom. He had, 17, what a hard age to be.
Yeah.
And he'd broken up with his girlfriend, the love of his life. He totaled a car. He just, poor guy having a tough summer. And then suddenly, like we were in dire straits. But I thought every speaker addressed that whole person kind of philosophy, even Sabina Beretta, who talked about synaptic pathology, right?
If I have a lot
How
of, I
your
have a lot of big question marks. I'm like, what are you talking about? But I get it because the synapses in the brain are important. And she talked about, to my layman's understanding, how important the chemistry of the soup, we call it, and that synapses aren't just in the neurons, that synapses are in glial cells. And, what does she call it? Wait a minute. It's the way trees and mushrooms are connected under the ground. Mycelium.
Mycelium.
The mycelium
Yes.
of the wholeness of the brain and how every part of the body affects other parts of the body. And I just love that research is being done about these things to maybe find a clue in a different place. That's what I got from hers. It's an underground network of there's so much we don't understand, and people are trying to understand it, and that comforts me a little bit.
This is one of the best benefits of going to the Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Symposium. Yes, it is research people and then one family member. Like I spoke there in 2017. I was the family member who talked about my son. This year it was Brandon Staglin, the founder of One Mind, which is just doing
And he
phenomenal.
has a lived experience with
Yes, and
psychosis.
he has had schizophrenia since, what did he say, 1990? I
Yeah.
mean,
Right.
so 34 years. But here's the benefit. I don't have to understand everything that Dr. Beretta said about glia and synapses and how cholesterol wraps around I don't have to understand all that. What impresses me is exactly what you said. Somebody is working on this. They are working on the details, smallest details that could possibly make a difference in how your son or your daughter is treated later. And they're not a bunch of fanfare. There's no parades for schizophrenia researchers, but there they are day after day doing their research. And what do they want to do? They want a good patient outcome. They want to solve this ugly, ugly riddle. And I thought all the speakers today were very user friendly. They made their talks user friendly. So did you see the number of caregivers in the audience when?
Yeah, at some point, I think it was about 40% of the people in the audience, at least, maybe
At
50.
least.
Yeah, it was, and people traveled from all over. I mean, we had, it was quite a variety, some of which it may have been user friendly, but some of it went over my head. But I took a lot of notes so that I could understand it, but it helped me to know that there are people with the kind of brain that can do research and statistics, because that is not me. I was just like, I turned to you at one point and went, thank God for people with these kind of brains.
Exactly.
And the teams that they work with are like 30, 40 people, just taking this data
Yes.
and
Yes.
I mean, John Tourist was talking about basically what my husband teaches, data architecture, and taking this sort of smartphone technology to gather more data in like 8 countries to help more people for people who participate. You know, we're going to put the speakers' names in the show notes so that you can see it.
Yes.
Dr. Scott Stroop also talked about evidence on outcomes of people. And he's doing a lot of studies, but
I think we should talk a little bit about Brandon in One Mind, because
Yeah.
that they're doing great things. Huh?
we're going to bring him on the podcast too. But can you sum up, or somebody sum up, what One Mind does?
He was impressive. He was
Yeah.
very impressive that he had been quite ill multiple times, made his way back. One thing that he said that I loved was, I always knew my family loved me. I always knew that. Like, but that was so important in his recovery that he felt loved and supported, and it gave him energy to help recover. But I can't even throw a rock and hit what he's not involved in. Their reach is so broad, and they are funding through an innovative, what was it called? It was like innovators circle type of thing. You can come to
yeah,
them and
funding
apply for money, and they'll fund
startups
your
and things. Yeah.
This is onemind.org in case you're interested to check it out. It's a schizophrenia care innovation. And he spoke about his lived experience, some of the innovations, and a call to action. So you can begin to learn about that by going to onemind.org. I love that he spoke about, I always talk about, for me, the 4 pillars of recovery. In my experience with my son is treatment, whatever that means to you. Structure. Many of us thrive under structure, myself included.
right.
Purpose and community.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
community could be your family, or for those whose families are not there, it can any kind of community. And he spoke about early care, community, family, innovation, and music.
Yes.
And he's a musician, and like the healing power of music, or just how studying music helps your brain. That was something I'd never heard before. I mean, I know art helps Nick, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, music also very I mean, I remember my husband making sure that all the kids had piano lessons, because he had read a study so long ago that if kids have piano lessons, they're better at math. Like, it does something to your math mind.
That's probably
It doesn't surprise me at all, and it's a component that people want to. That it seems to, especially whenever budgetary things are talked about, anything to do with art becomes superfluous, or
right.
something that we can cut. And I think for these people, and an inordinate number of people with schizophrenia have strong artistic tendencies.
Yes. Yeah.
My son writes poetry.
Yeah, so there is a connection there.
While we're talking about One Mind, and I did promise Brandon I would mention this, I'm going to mention it. They're doing a fundraiser. It's their 30th year, celebrating the healing power of music and innovation. This is the size font I am trying to read. So in case you're wondering, not this one, but this one. And if you're listening, it's tiny. So on September 7th, they're having the One Mind Music Festival for Brain Health, and it is in the Napa area of Central to Northern California. And if you go to onemind.org, I think for this, you go to music-festival.org. I don't know how they got that,
Yeah, that's a good deal.
that website, but 30 years. So you can check that out and go to it. It helps them to raise funds for what they do.
Oh, they raise a lot of money at that music festival. That music festival
is last year.
Elle King is going to be the performer this year, but they typically every year have just an amazing performer and a couple days of music and community. And it's their main fundraiser for all of their activities. So yeah, he was really impressive with his just openness to the audience.
Yeah,
right?
and very well versed and a beautiful PowerPoint presentation. We're going to have him on the podcast. Honestly, we're beginning to run out of time, but
Okay,
I want to. We have a little bit. So I want to make so we've kind of covered what happened today, except for my favorite part of in-person gatherings are the conversations you have around lunch, the conversations in the hallway, the conversations waiting online for the ladies' room and the men's room, and conversation getting into the elevator. Like that's part of the beauty of gathering together. If you, listener, are feeling all alone, I mean, so many people came up to us, and
Yeah.
one woman said she likes to fall asleep to our podcast, but then she listens to it another 2 or 3 times, so she gets the whole thing. If we are your source of community, and we're grateful in the podcast
yes.
that I just banged my microphone. That was a no-no, but anyway, sorry everyone. Then we're glad to be that, but I encourage everybody to go to NAMI Family to Family, find a support group, find people. My solace has been in the community, the club nobody wants to be in, but we're in the community that we find. And this was such a wonderful day. And, thank you for letting us know about it. I'm the ambassador, so I know. I'm the unofficial ambassador, but to have the opportunity to gather together in a day that was about hope and about the future and about research and
And
about
connection. It was
possibility and
about
connection,
connection.
and
And
to be around this Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Center where they value the partnership so much. And one of the last things they said yesterday is, how do we take this model and spread it around the country?
uh-huh.
Or maybe some of the family members in the room were saying, how do we take this model and
Yeah,
tell our
yeah.
hospitals about it? So Laura, you've been working with them for many, many years. What
Mhm.
else would you like us to know about this organization, or about today, if we left anything out, or anybody want to say anything?
They are unique in understanding and putting forth in every effort. Dr. Akira Sawa has been there since 2012 when the Schizophrenia Center started. And did you see his little tree graphic? It was the lab bench, the clinic, the patient, and the community. And the Schizophrenia Center was started 12 years ago with the idea in mind that these four pillars are all connected, and the lab bench is going to inform the clinical treatment. The clinical treatment will improve the patient and the family's outcome, and that in turn benefits all of society. And that's unique, and it's out there and they practice it. That is the unique part. There is no such thing as lip service there. They are as dedicated as they appeared today and last night. And they hosted these two events. I bought all the swag bags. I did what I could to just pitch in and buy some stuff and make them happy. Make the people who traveled to the symposium feel special and feel appreciated,
And
right?
you did that. So
You
thank
did.
you.
It was
But
wonderful.
they paid for everything else. And they paid for the family night, the room, the catering. Today, they paid for the room at the place, and they bought everyone lunch. And it's just really putting your money where your mouth is. Schizophrenia is the hardest disease to raise money for, just traditionally. And every penny is important to them, and they spent it on you. You know,
Yeah.
that's what's amazing.
There's a couple other things I wanted to bring up that we can't really go into too much, but I think that are very important. One thing that was just blew me away that I've never heard referred to so often by clinicians and providers is the need for therapy. Most of the time, people with schizophrenia, therapy is not even an option. I mean, it's not even,
Right.
and therapists don't know how to deal with people with schizophrenia. And that was a big component of a lot of these presentations. And I found that very, very encouraging. And then the other thing we didn't get into at all was all this precision medicine.
Yes,
All
that was
the, and
huge.
that was that, and just the whole component of innovation, that there, again, back to the thing that there are people working on this, and there's so much new technology and so much innovation, and there are people who are looking, like the last speaker who talked about
Mhm.
the cell phones and all of the data apps and all of that, the innovation and the precision. It was precision
Precision medicine or
diagnosis.
something. I'll
Yeah,
look it up. Yeah,
which
precision.
I mean, it was
You know,
fascinating.
that is so important. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a couple of things I remember. I've been trying
talk,
to,
I'll
yeah, go ahead, take a look through it. I've been trying to educate myself, as you have, and Mindy has. Hi, Mindy, we miss you. Trying to educate myself. And I remember hearing at a NAMI conference, the then head, I don't remember who it was. I don't think it was Ken, but I don't remember who it was, but he said, schizophrenia research now is where cancer research was 20 years ago, where you had chemo or you didn't, and
Exactly.
so, right. So that now chemo is precision medicine, like and I also remember hearing that there was a way that you could take stem cells from dead skin cells and determine which antidepressant would work for you before you had to take it for 4 to 6 weeks. So that's one of the things they spoke about today, is understanding the patient and doing tests to determine which, this is in the future, which medication would work before they have to go through months and months of deciding if it works or not. And that, again, that's not here now, but precision treatment, we're probably saying the wrong word and we can't find it.
No, and it's the idea that one size does not fit all, and we have to get better at targeting what
It's
the actual
psychosis
illness is.
precision medicine.
Yeah,
And we had Russ Margolis spoke about this.
yes.
It's Psychosis Precision Medicine Center for Excellence. And they talked all the,
PMCOE.
yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. So there are these things out there and being practiced here. And if a listener has a treatment team willing to speak to people at Johns Hopkins about how they do things, are they willing to speak to other treatment teams about their
I think
process?
that they're very willing. I mean, they have time constraints, like they can't travel and help people set up clinics and
Right.
whatever. But certainly you saw all the collaboration today, as evidenced by the various research projects that Hopkins has going on. And they are in collaboration with other medical schools and et cetera. And so they are the perfect people to share, in my opinion, because it's in practice, it's not in theory. And today, this made me so happy. This was worth all the hard work, everything. A gentleman came up to me and he was friends with another lady who I had met 5 or 6 years ago. And she brought him and he said, my son is, not doing well. Been sick for a while, etc. But today I have hope. And that meant everything to me as a mother, bringing people to Baltimore to experience these gigantic, dedicated brains. And it's all for you, right? And that's really the outcome you want when you have a symposium. This is a research symposium that families are more than welcome to, right? And caregivers, and as they described it, multiple stakeholders. Everybody who's got some skin in the game with this is welcome to have these conversations. It's just really unique. And if I could have my wish beyond anything for myself, it would be that other families could experience this ultra competent, ultra compassionate care for their loved one that they love so much, and you just want the doctors to love them too, and But they lead by example, and this will be spreading. It won't be tomorrow, but did you notice how Russ Margolis said, here's our phone number and our coordinator, and here's her email. And if you need to be seen at our clinic, please call us. Like, he invited people to their very busy, outpatient treatment programs. But what more can they do to try to help you, right? They really do it all.
So I think on that note and that comment that you were able to give hope to someone, sometimes that's the best thing that we can have is hope.
Right.
And so Laura, thank you so much. I think Zach would be proud. I think he is, wherever, or go for it, Mom, or whatever. I don't know what you believe, but it comforts me to think that.
And thank you.
There's a gift somewhere in there, we can't even begin to address the grief of losing a child.
Right.
But thank you for taking that grief and turning it into this advocacy and mission to bring hope to others.
And thank you for coming to Baltimore and sharing this experience with us. I hope it was meaningful and educational, and I hope it enriches your lives and what you want and what you need for your children also.
Very much so.
Yes. Yes.
So.
Thank you so much for coming and for hosting this podcast to kind of bookend the exciting 2 days we had. It was really a pleasure seeing and meeting you both, meeting Mimi for the first time.
Yeah, and seeing you again. The website for Johns Hopkins, do you know it off the top of your head? Just Google Johns Hopkins Schizophrenia Center, and
Yes.
you'll see it. And so you can find out more about what they do. And thank you so much for joining us.
You too. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches with Randy Kay, Mindy Greiling, and Miriam Feldman. To get in touch with us or to learn more about our books, please visit our websites at miriam-feldman.com, mindygreiling.com, or randykay.com.